This week I realized something. I'm not numb. I've just been through too much, and somewhere along the way I got used to not feeling anything. The videos on High Day Psych this week, they said the things I never could. The first one stopped me in my tracks: 11 traits of people who have suffered too much. No one's born cold, we just learn to protect ourselves. The second one hit deeper than I expected. 7. Signs of a sex-based trauma bond, not love. It's scary how often we confuse pain with passion. And the last one, what happens when you ghost someone? I've been ghosted. I've ghosted others. But behind the silence, there was always something left unsaid. If you've ever felt these unspoken wounds too, like subscribe and turn on the bell for High Day.
I don't remember exactly when the pain started. There wasn't one loud explosion, no screaming, no dramatic collapse. It was quieter than that. It crept in during the in-between moments, between the texts that were never replied to, between the nights I couldn't sleep, between the times I told people I was fine and wished someone would call my bluff. Pain doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just changes you. I look in the mirror and I know I'm not the same person I used to be, not because of the way I look, but because of how I now feel things, or sometimes how I don't. There are days when I catch myself smiling in front of people. And then I feel nothing, just static, like my emotions are somewhere else, lagging behind. But here's the thing no one told me about pain. It doesn't only leave wounds, it reshapes you. Sometimes I wonder, if people could see the weight I carry, would they treat me differently? Would they understand why I hesitate before trusting? Why I walk away when things get too close? Why silence feels safer than speaking? I used to think these were signs of weakness. Now I'm not so sure, because if I'm still standing after all I've faced, then maybe, just maybe, this pain didn't break me. It built something else inside me, something quieter, stronger, more aware. If you've ever felt like the pain you carry has made you harder to recognize, if you've ever looked in the mirror and seen the scarred version of who you once were, then maybe you'll see a part of yourself in me. And maybe, just maybe, what we see as damage most people think
actually the
pain looks like
architecture
crying
of survival.
or screaming or collapsing on the floor, and sometimes it does, but not always. Pain can also look like a smile at the wrong time, a joke that feels just a little too forced. A quiet person who used to be full of life. That was me. I didn't realize how much I had changed until I couldn't recognize how I reacted to things anymore. I used to be carefree. I used to laugh without thinking twice. I used to trust people with my whole heart, and then life started dealing me losses. One heartbreak, then another, then a betrayal that cut deeper than I thought was possible. I told myself I was fine, that this was just part of growing up, that everyone went through this. But deep down, I wasn't fine. I was shutting down. I stopped sharing how I really felt. I became hyper-aware of how people looked at me. I started scanning for signs that someone might leave, might lie, might hurt me. I didn't call it trauma back then. I just thought I was becoming smarter, more careful, more realistic. But I wasn't just growing cautious. I was growing closed, and the problem is no one noticed because I was still functioning. I still smiled. I still went to work. I still helped friends. But inside, it felt like I was carrying a backpack full of bricks, memories, regrets, questions, and the fear that if I put the bag down, everything I had been holding together would fall apart. I started developing patterns, ways of coping that I didn't even recognize as responses to pain. I couldn't see that I was becoming more empathetic because I had suffered. I couldn't see that I tried to fix everyone else because I couldn't fix myself. I couldn't see that I had stopped trusting, not just people, but life itself. Pain doesn't always come with clear signs. It often hides in your habits, in your choices, in the way you show up or don't. And slowly, without knowing it, pain starts rewriting your identity, not because you're weak, but because you're human. I didn't know then that what I was experiencing had a name. That trauma could reshape your nervous system. That survival mode could become a way of life. But now I do. And maybe, if you felt these things too, it's time to look at your own habits. Because sometimes what we think is just who we are is actually just who we had to become in order to survive. But what I was actually becoming was hypervigilant. After you've been hurt deeply, your brain starts to see the world differently. It's a defense mechanism, a survival strategy, one that whispers to you, never let that happen again. And here's what that looked like for me. I developed empathy. But not just ordinary empathy. It became almost like a sixth sense. I could pick up on someone's shift in tone before they even finished a sentence. I could sense discomfort in a crowded room, like static in the air. People called me intuitive, but the truth is I had learned to read danger in micro-expressions, because once I missed the signs, and it hurt. Now I read everything, every pause, every sigh. Every "I'm fine" that sounds just a bit too thin. I learned what it meant to suffer quietly. So now I can't help but notice when someone else is doing the same. That's the beauty of post-traumatic empathy. It's not just kindness. It's recognition. You've been there, and now you can see the invisible pain in others. But that empathy came with a cost. I developed what psychologists call a savior complex. I didn't just want people to be okay. I needed them to be okay because their pain reminded me of mine, and if I could rescue them, maybe it meant I had some power over what once made me feel powerless. So I became the helper, the fixer. The one who would stay up at 2 a.m. to talk someone out of their breakdown, even if I was breaking too. But I didn't realize that in trying to save others, I was abandoning myself. Burnout didn't come with flashing lights. It came in silence, in numbness, in not knowing what I needed anymore because I was so tuned into everyone else. Compassion is beautiful, but boundaries are necessary. That's something I had to learn the hard way. And then there was the guarded heart. I didn't even know how much I had walled myself off. I still smiled. I still joked. But intimacy felt like exposure. Vulnerability felt like danger. Judith Herman, a trauma researcher, calls this a natural defense. When your trust has been broken, your brain rewires to keep you safe, not open. Safe, so I kept people at a distance, close enough to care, but far enough that they couldn't hurt me. The problem is, connection requires risk, and healing requires connection. I was caught in a loop, wanting love but fearing it, craving closeness but sabotaging it. It took me a long time to learn that trust doesn't come back all at once. It returns in pieces, and it's okay to rebuild slowly. And then I craved solitude, not because I hated people, but because I needed to hear myself again. After so much chaos, noise felt overwhelming. Silence became sacred. Being alone was no longer lonely, it was restorative. It was where I processed what I couldn't explain to others, where I cried without justifying it, where I stopped performing for approval. I began to understand that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it happens in the quietest places. Pain also made me obsessed with control. After so much uncertainty, I needed routine. Predictability, structure. I made backup plans for backup plans. I rehearsed conversations in my head before they even happened. I overprepared, because unpredictability once shattered me. But here's what I had to learn. Control is a safety blanket, not a cure. You can't prepare for everything, but you can build the strength to handle what comes. Letting go wasn't about giving up. It was about trusting that I'd survived worse. Resilience became my silent weapon, not the kind people cheer for, the kind no one sees, the kind where you get up and go to work with a smile even though your chest is heavy, where you show up to therapy even when progress feels invisible, where you love again after being shattered. People called me strong. But they didn't see the nights I broke down, or the mornings I nearly gave up. Resilience is not about never falling. It's about choosing to stand back up even if you're trembling. And finally, I became hyper-independent. I stopped asking for help, not because I didn't need it, but because I was afraid it wouldn't come, because needing people had once led to betrayal. So I trained myself to never need anyone. It made me efficient, reliable, but also lonely. Hyperindependence is a trauma response dressed up as competence. It whispers, if I do it alone, I can't be disappointed. But healing means unlearning that too. It means letting safe people in, even just a little. Because we were never meant to carry everything alone, pain transformed me. It reshaped how I see people, how I react, how I connect, and how I protect myself. But understanding these patterns gave me power. It helped me stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what happened to me? And that shift, that question, changed everything. People often ask me, how did you start healing? What helped you get through it? And the truth is, there was no magical moment, no big breakthrough, just small shifts, tiny, consistent changes that didn't look like much at first. But over time, they started to anchor me. They started pulling me out of survival mode, and I want to share some of those shifts with you, because maybe they'll help you find your footing too. 1. I learned to check in with myself, not just with others. I used to be the person who asked everyone, how are you really doing? But I never turned that question inward. Now I pause. I ask myself daily, how's your heart? What are you carrying right now? What do you need today that you didn't get yesterday? Self-awareness is a muscle. You don't build it by ignoring yourself. You build it by listening without judgment. 2. I gave myself permission to rest, not just physically, emotionally. There were days I used to push through everything, work, relationships, expectations. But now I've learned that healing happens best when I'm not fighting myself. So I rest without guilt, without apology. Sometimes that means saying no. Sometimes it means canceling plans. Sometimes it means taking a walk alone instead of showing up for one more obligation. And that's okay. 3. I created little rituals that grounded me. When everything felt chaotic, I found peace in structure. Not control, just rhythm. A warm cup of tea every morning. The same song when I journal. Lighting a candle when I feel overwhelmed. These small acts reminded me that I still have power, even when life feels uncontrollable. I can choose how I care for myself. One of my favorites is the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding exercise. 5 things I can see, 4 I can touch, 3 I can hear, 2 I can smell, 1 I can taste. It pulls me out of spirals and into the present. Right here, right now, alive. 4 I practiced saying what I actually mean. I stopped saying I'm fine when I was. I stopped shrinking my truth to keep others comfortable. That was hard, but my healing depends on honesty. Now I practice using phrases like, I'm not okay, but I'm working through it. I don't have the words right now, but I feel heavy. I need some space, and it's not personal. It's not about oversharing. It's about aligning my words with my truth. 5. I learned the difference between boundaries and walls. For a long time, I confused the two. I thought protecting myself meant shutting everyone out, but boundaries are not about isolation. They're about intention. Now I ask myself, is this boundary coming from fear or from self-respect? I give people access based on consistency, not charm. I listen more to actions than apologies. And most importantly, I trust myself to walk away from what drains me. 6. I stopped waiting to feel ready. Healing isn't a straight line. There's no moment when everything clicks into place, so I started showing up scared. Trying even when I doubted myself, speaking even when my voice trembled. and every time I did, my confidence grew, not because I was fearless, but because I chose to act despite the fear. 7. I built a support system slowly, but intentionally. Not everyone deserves access to your healing. Not everyone knows how to hold your truth gently. I started seeking out people who made me feel safe. People who listened without fixing, who stayed even when I was messy, who asked how they could support me instead of assuming. Healing in community changed everything, because pain isolates, but connection restores. Even one safe person can be enough. 8. I began celebrating the smallest victories, getting out of bed on a hard day, not texting someone who hurt me, choosing not to numb the pain with distractions. Holding eye contact instead of looking away. These aren't small things, they're everything. They're the quiet revolutions that healing is made of. 9. I forgave myself for not healing faster. There were days I beat myself up for still struggling, for still missing them, for still feeling broken. But then I realized healing is not a competition. It's not about speed, it's about depth. Some wounds take time. And that's not weakness. It's honoring what you've been through. 10. I started believing that I could create something beautiful out of what broke me, not to erase the pain, but to give it purpose. I began using what I learned to support others. To write, to speak, to show up with honesty, because the pain didn't destroy me, it shaped me, and now it guides how I love, how I serve, how I live. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't always look like milestones. Sometimes it looks like breathing through the ache, choosing not to numb, showing up when it's hard, and those moments stacked gently, one on top of the other. That's what transformation is made of. If you've made it this far, there's a reason. You've felt it too, haven't you? The silent kind of pain, the kind that doesn't scream but still leaves a mark. Maybe you've been carrying things that no one else sees. Maybe you've learned to smile while your heart trembles. Maybe you've picked yourself up more times than you can count. If so, let me say this to you, as someone who knows that journey well. You are not broken, you are becoming. You are not weak, you are weathered, wiser, more awake to the depth of life than most people will ever be. What happened to you was never fair, but what you build from it, that's yours. That's your power. Your scars are not shameful. They are evidence that you healed, evidence that you lived through it. And if you're still struggling, still searching, still learning how to breathe again, that's okay too. There is no rush, no deadline on healing, only the quiet miracle of continuing, of still waking up, still trying, still hoping, even when the weight is heavy. That's strength. You may not always feel strong, but if you've made it through things that once felt impossible, you already are, you're still here, and that means something. So today, I invite you to do one simple thing. Recognize the resilience in you. Name it, honor it. Look at how far you've come, not with judgment, but with awe. You didn't just survive, you adapted, you transformed. You grew into someone who sees the world more clearly, who feels more deeply, who understands what it means to keep going. You're not alone in this, not anymore. If any part of my story sounded like yours, share it. Let someone else know they're not the only one either. And if you need support, ask for it. You are not a burden. You are a human being learning to carry heavy things, and that deserves compassion. So keep going, keep showing up. Not perfectly, just honestly. You are worthy of peace, of love, of healing, and of every soft, beautiful thing this life still has to offer. Let's not just survive pain. Let's become something extraordinary because of it. If this story touched you, leave a comment below. Tell me, what did pain teach you that you never expected to learn? And if you're ready to go deeper, we've created a video just for you about how to heal after trauma. Click it. Watch it and remind yourself you were never meant to do this alone. We're healing together. I used to think relationships only ended when something big happened, a huge fight, a betrayal, a dramatic goodbye. But for me, that's not how things ended. Not always. Some of them just faded. One day we were texting nonstop. And then the next day I said nothing. No warning, no explanation, just silence. At the time, I didn't think I was being cruel. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just felt drained, not emotionally available. Not ready for another deep talk, not even able to type one more message. I was so tired that a simple reply felt like lifting a mountain, so I told myself, I'll answer later. But later never came. And soon days turned into weeks, and the silence became permanent. I didn't ghost them because I didn't care. I ghosted them because I didn't know how to show up, because my brain was overwhelmed, and my heart felt completely shut down. No one ever talks about how exhausting it can be just to stay connected, how even the people we like can feel like too much when we're mentally fried, and how easy it is to disappear, not because we want to disappear, but because we don't know how to say, I'm not okay. At first, it felt like the safer choice, the quieter way out, but later I would come to realize something else. That silence has its own consequences too. It took me a long time to admit this, but the truth is I didn't ghost because I didn't like them. I ghosted because I couldn't handle me. It wasn't about them at all. It was about the pressure I felt inside, to reply, to explain, to be available, to give more than I had the capacity for. Some people can communicate clearly when they're overwhelmed. I wasn't one of those people, not back then. Back then, one more message felt like one more weight I couldn't carry. Even when the person was kind, even when nothing was wrong, I felt this invisible wall building inside me, and I just stopped showing up. I'd say to myself, they'll understand. Or I'll reach out when I feel better. But by the time I felt okay again, it had been too long, and it felt too weird to reappear, so I stayed gone. Looking back, I can see how that silence left people confused. They probably kept checking their phones, wondering what they did wrong, replaying the last thing they said, but the truth is they didn't do anything. They just needed more from me than I was able to give, and instead of saying that, I vanished. It wasn't hate, it wasn't rejection. It was emotional exhaustion, and honestly, sometimes that felt worse, because the guilt didn't go away. It just lingered in the background, quiet, persistent, like a notification I never opened. And when you leave that many messages unanswered, you're not just avoiding others, you're slowly losing the part of you that knows how to connect. At first, ghosting felt like relief, like I found a secret exit from the emotional pressure building inside me. No confrontation, no drama, just silence. And for a while, I convinced myself that silence was harmless. I told myself this is easier for both of us. If I say something, it'll hurt them. If I explain, it'll sound selfish. If I tell the truth, I'll look like the bad guy. So instead, I said nothing. But what I didn't realize was that avoiding guilt doesn't mean guilt goes away. It just hides, it waits, and over time, it started showing up in strange ways. I'd lie awake at night, replaying conversations I never finished. I'd think about the last message I left them on read, and I'd wonder what they thought, what they felt, if they thought they weren't good enough, if they thought it was their fault. That's when I started to feel it, not guilt in the loud, obvious way, but guilt in the form of emotional residue, that dull ache of knowing I avoided something I should have faced. It followed me into new friendships, new dates, even random texts from people I liked. Every time someone reached out, I felt a flicker of pressure, a voice inside saying, "Are you going to disappear again? Do you even know how to finish things properly? Can you actually be honest this time?" And the worst part was, the more I avoided those uncomfortable moments, the harder it became to face anything real. I started doubting myself, my ability to connect, my ability to handle conflict, my ability to be a good person. That's the thing about emotional residue. It doesn't just make you feel bad about the past. It starts shaping how you see yourself in the present, and that's dangerous. Because when you believe you're a bad communicator, you stop trying. When you think you always hurt people, you stay silent. When you feel like you're not capable of honesty, you run. I thought ghosting protected me from guilt, but really, it turned that guilt inward. It didn't make me a villain, but it did make me avoidant, disconnected, and ashamed of how many bridges I'd quietly burned. I used to think closure was something I owed others. Now I know it's also something I owe myself. And every time I disappear without a word, I lose a piece of the person I'm trying to become. So no, I wasn't escaping them. I was escaping the version of me I didn't want to face. But here's the truth I had to learn the hard way. Avoiding guilt doesn't erase it, it just buries it deeper, and eventually it finds a way back to the surface. At first, ghosting felt like relief, like I found a secret exit from the emotional pressure building inside me. No confrontation, no drama, just silence. And for a while, I convinced myself that silence was harmless. I told myself this is easier for both of us. If I say something, it'll hurt them. If I explain, it'll sound selfish. If I tell the truth, I'll look like the bad guy. So instead, I said nothing. But what I didn't realize was that avoiding guilt doesn't mean guilt goes away. It just hides, it waits, and over time it started showing up in strange ways. I'd lie awake at night, replaying conversations I never finished. I'd think about the last message I left them on read, and I'd wonder what they thought, what they felt, if they thought they weren't good enough, if they thought it was their fault. That's when I started to feel it, not guilt in the loud, obvious way, but guilt in the form of emotional residue, that dull ache of knowing I avoided something I should have faced. It followed me into new friendships, new dates, even random texts from people I liked. Every time someone reached out, I felt a flicker of pressure, a voice inside saying, "Are you going to disappear again? Do you even know how to finish things properly? Can you actually be honest this time?" And the worst part was, the more I avoided those uncomfortable moments, the harder it became to face anything real. I started doubting myself, my ability to connect, my ability to handle conflict, my ability to be a good person. That's the thing about emotional residue. It doesn't just make you feel bad about the past. It starts shaping how you see yourself in the present, and that's dangerous. Because when you believe you're a bad communicator, you stop trying. When you think you always hurt people, you stay silent. When you feel like you're not capable of honesty, you run. I thought ghosting protected me from guilt, but really, it turned that guilt inward. It didn't make me a villain, but it did make me avoidant, disconnected, and ashamed of how many bridges I'd quietly burned. I used to think closure was something I owed others. Now I know it's also something I owe myself. And every time I disappear without a word, I lose a piece of the person I'm trying to become. So no, I wasn't escaping them. I was escaping the version of me I didn't want to face. But here's the truth I had to learn the hard way. Avoiding guilt doesn't erase it, it just buries it deeper, and eventually it finds a way back to the surface. I'll be honest, there are still times when I choose silence, but now I choose it with intention, not as an escape, but as a boundary. See, ghosting isn't always a sign of immaturity. Sometimes it's a sign that someone crossed a line you've set again and again, and they ignored it. Sometimes silence is the only language they understand. I've had moments where someone kept pushing after I said no, where they guilted me, manipulated me, or made me feel unsafe. And in those cases, I didn't owe them a paragraph. I didn't owe them closure, because safety comes first. And if someone threatens that, even subtly, even emotionally, you have every right to walk away, to block, to disappear. But that's not what most of my ghosting used to be. It wasn't about protecting myself. It was about avoiding guilt, avoiding discomfort, avoiding growth. And that's the part I had to face. That's the pattern I had to break. Now, when I feel like disappearing, I pause. I ask myself, is this person unsafe, or am I just scared of being honest? If it's the second one, I challenge myself to speak up, to say, I need space right now, or I don't think I have the capacity to continue this. Simple words, hard to say, but powerful, because it's not about being perfect. It's about being responsible. It's about showing up for the parts of you that used to hide, and slowly becoming someone who doesn't run anymore. If you've ghosted someone before, it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means you've got something to look at, something to learn from, and something to do better with next time, because there will be a next time, another conversation, another hard truth, another moment where silence seems easier. And in that moment, I hope you remember this. You don't owe everyone a response, but you do owe yourself the chance to be honest, to break the pattern, and to prove to yourself that you're safe enough now. Well, does I thought it was love. She looked at me like I was the only person in the world. She laughed at all my jokes, texted me good morning before I even opened my eyes, and when we kissed, it felt like I had finally found something real. Things moved fast. Within days, we were spending every night together. Within weeks, I knew the way her body moved better than I knew her last name. It felt electric, addictive, powerful. But somewhere between the passion and the pillow talk, I started feeling anxious, like I was trying too hard to stay in her good graces, like if I messed up once, she'd pull away and never come back. Sex became a way to hold on to her, a way to feel close, even when I was scared, even when I was hurting, and I didn't have the words for it at the time. But now I know what it was. It wasn't just love. It was a trauma bond wrapped in lust, tied with fear, and sealed by silence. At first, I thought I was just overthinking. We were having sex almost every time we met. She said it was how she felt close. And I needed to feel close too. But then little things started to feel off. Like how she always hinted at sex, even when we hadn't talked about anything real. We never spoke about our families, our goals, or what scared us at night. But she'd already told me what she liked in bed. What she expected me to be. It was like, we skipped the part where people actually get to know each other, and every time I asked for space, or said I wanted to slow things down, her tone changed. She'd go cold, withdraw affection. Make jokes that didn't feel like jokes. What, you're not into me anymore. Don't be boring. This is just how adults do it. And so I stayed quiet, pushed through, said yes when I wasn't ready. Smiled when my gut told me something was wrong, because I didn't want to lose her. Because deep down, I believed that if I kept being what she wanted, maybe she'd give me what I needed. It took me a while to understand this wasn't about love. This was about control disguised as chemistry. Psychologists call it a trauma bond, a cycle of emotional highs and lows that makes you feel addicted to someone who actually makes you feel unsafe. And when sex is part of that cycle, it hits even deeper because sex is supposed to connect us. But here, it was a reward for obedience and a punishment when I tried to be myself. I started shrinking in my own skin. And that was the first real crack. I didn't realize it at first. I thought what we had was just intense, passionate, maybe even messy love. But the deeper I went, the more I saw it. The signs that what we had wasn't intimacy, it was emotional captivity. Here are the 7 signs I now know I ignored because I wanted so badly for it to be love. 1. Everything moved too fast. She rushed in like a wave, swept me into late-night texts, deep conversations, hands on my skin. It felt exciting, like we were meant to collide, but we never had time to build trust. We just fell headfirst into bed into each other, before I even knew who she really was. In trauma bonding, this isn't an accident. It's emotional flooding, designed to override your judgment before your instincts can catch up. Real love gives you space to breathe. It felt like I couldn't even come up for air. 2. I was love-bombed into submission. She made me feel like I was everything, her favorite person, the one. She praised me, touched me, gave me gifts, then wrapped it in sex. At first it felt incredible, but soon I realized. Every moment of affection came with an unspoken price. If I disagreed, pulled back, or said no, the affection vanished. Psychologically, this is called intermittent reinforcement. Your brain becomes addicted to the unpredictability of being wanted, then rejected, then wanted again. Add sex into that cycle, and it becomes nearly impossible to walk away. You don't know if you're in love or just addicted to relief. 3. I was criticized during intimacy. You're not good at that. My ex used to do it better. Are you sure you know what you're doing? She'd say it with a smirk, like a joke, but I felt myself shrinking every time. I started overthinking everything, trying to be better in bed, trying to earn her approval with performance. In healthy relationships, sex is a conversation, but this wasn't dialogue, it was evaluation. And it turned intimacy into a test I was terrified to fail. 4. I started dreading sex. There was a time sex made me feel alive, safe, wanted, but with her it became anxiety. Would I disappoint her again? Would she pull away if I didn't do it right? Would she talk about me behind my back? When the body feels unsafe, the nervous system reacts. You tense, you disconnect, you go numb. Sex became something I endured, not something I desired. And that's when I realized my body knew before my mind did. 5. My self-worth depended on her approval. If she was warm, I felt confident. If she ignored me, I spiraled. I'd check my phone every 5 minutes. Replay our last night together, asking myself, did I mess up? Was I not enough? I wasn't living for love. I was surviving for validation. Trauma bonding ties your self-esteem to the unpredictable moods of another person. You don't know who you are outside their eyes. And that's exactly how they keep you close. 6. Sex was a tool, not a gift. She used sex to reward obedience and withhold it when I resisted. If I apologized, agreed, or played nice, she'd be all over me. But the moment I stood up for myself, she'd freeze me out like I didn't exist. Intimacy stopped being a bridge between us. It became a leash, and I chased it. Because sometimes being used felt safer than being alone. White heavy check mark 7. We used sex to avoid the truth. We didn't talk about our arguments. We didn't resolve our tension. We just had sex and called it making up. But nothing ever actually got better. We avoided the hard truths by burying them under desire. Psychologists call this false intimacy, when closeness is mistaken for connection. When sex replaces repair, when pleasure replaces safety, we weren't healing, we were hiding. At the time, I told myself this was passion, that this was how real relationships worked, that every love has its darkness, but now I know. Love doesn't keep you small. Love doesn't make you beg for worth. Love doesn't feel like walking on glass while smiling through it. If any of this sounds familiar, please know it's not your fault. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're just human, longing for real connection, but stuck in a loop that looks like love and feels like survival. And once you see it for what it is, that's when you can begin to break free. Getting out of that relationship wasn't some dramatic ending. There was no final fight, no clean break, just a quiet moment when I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself anymore. That was the beginning. And what followed wasn't some big, brave leap. It was a series of small, daily choices, habits that slowly brought me back to me. White, heavy check mark 1. I started writing after every time we were intimate. I kept a journal. Not for her, for me. After every time we had sex, I'd write down one simple question. How do I feel right now? Not what I should feel, not what she wanted me to feel, but what my body and heart were actually saying. Some days I felt warm, other days hollow, used, unheard. That's when I began to see it. The more I gave myself away, the less whole I felt. When we're trauma bonded, we lose the ability to tell what's real for us. Journaling brought me back to my inner voice, the one I had buried under her approval. White, heavy check mark 2. I stopped using sex to fix thing. There was a night we fought. She yelled. I shut down. And like always, she reached for my body. But this time, I stepped back. I said, I'm not ready to be close right now. We haven't even talked. She stared at me, shocked, maybe even offended. But in that moment, I chose truth over comfort. That was the beginning of reclaiming my boundaries, because real intimacy starts when you can say, not yet, and still feel safe. White, heavy check mark 3. I told someone the truth. I remember sitting on my friend's couch, staring at my hands and whispering, I don't think this is love, but I don't know how to leave. And they didn't judge me. They didn't tell me to walk away. They just listened. That moment cracked the shame, because trauma bonds feed on silence, and speaking your truth, even once, starts to loosen their grip. White, heavy check mark 4. I learned what healthy love actually looks like, not just from books, but from therapy, from friends in respectful relationships, from watching people say no and still be loved. I had to retrain my nervous system to recognize calm as safe, not boring, to see boundaries as love, not rejection. We repeat the chaos we grew up with until we learn how safety feels. White, heavy check mark 5. I stopped chasing closure and started creating peace. She never apologized, never admitted anything, never even said goodbye. For a long time, that hurt. I wanted her to explain why she did what she did, why I wasn't enough, why it ended the way it did. But over time, I learned something. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you give yourself. When you stop trying to make pain make sense and start choosing peace over permission. White, heavy check mark 6. I learned to love without needing to be needed. For so long, I mistook being needed for being loved. If someone desired me, I felt worthy. If they didn't, I felt invisible. But now, I'm learning to sit with myself, to ask, what do I want? Does this feel safe? Can I be loved without being used? I'm still learning, still healing. But I no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. I used to think breaking free would feel like running away, but it didn't. It felt like coming home, to myself. If you're in something that doesn't feel right, but you don't know how to let go, you don't have to leap. You just have to start by listening to the part of you that's still whispering, I deserve more than this. If I could sit across from the version of me who stayed, the one who made excuses for her, who thought this was the best love he'd ever get, who kept giving his body just to feel close, I wouldn't yell. I wouldn't say, why didn't you leave? I'd just say this. I see how hard you're trying. I see how much you wanted this to be real, and none of that makes you weak. It makes you human. Because that's what trauma bonds do. They make you confuse attention with affection, control with care, lust with love, survival with safety, and when sex is part of that bond, it cuts even deeper because it touches your body and your worth. But here's what I learned. In the quiet mornings, in therapy, in the nights I sat with my pain instead of trying to numb it, you can unlearn chaos. You can retrain your nervous system. You can find people who love you gently. And you can come back to yourself without asking for permission. So if you're watching this and something in your chest feels heavy, like I just read a part of your journal out loud, please don't scroll away from that feeling. That's not weakness. That's your body whispering, it's time. Time to stop performing. Time to stop proving. Time to stop surviving love that only hurts. You don't have to lose yourself to be loved. High Day Psych. If this video helped you name something you couldn't explain before, tell me in the comments. I read them. I really do. And you never know who else might need to hear your story just to feel less alone. And hey, if you're healing too, hit like, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more reminders that love should never feel like pain. You're not alone.